Good evening. I'm David Ackerley, Dean of Rausser College of Natural Resources, and it's a wonderful pleasure to have you all here. Many of you are repeat visitors for Albright Lectures over the years, and I will say it's one of my great pleasures and opportunities to serve as the introducer to a long record of distinguished guests, which we will add to tonight. So welcome to Rausser College's Horace M. Albright Lecture on Conservation in collaboration with Berkeley Wildlife and the School of Journalism. Together, it is our pleasure to welcome our esteemed guest, Dr. Jill Tiefenthaler, CEO at the National Geographic Society, on her visit to Berkeley. Before we start the program, I'd like to share a bit of background on these lectures. There's actually another before we start the program. Silence your cell phones. We're not streaming, but we are recording, and these are available afterwards, so we like to have a nice high quality sound and presentation. The Horace Albright Lecture Series at the Rausser College of Natural Resources has been going strong for over 50 years. The lectures are a tribute to the achievements of Horace Albright, born in Bishop, California in 1890, a graduate of UC Berkeley in 1912, second director of the National Park Service, and a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom bestowed by Jimmy Carter. Horace Albright's lifelong dedication to conservation, exemplified by his role in the founding of the National Park Service and his enduring work to protect America's natural resources, continues to inspire the mission of institutions like Rausser College of Natural Resources and the National Geographic Society. Both institutions are built on the same foundational principles championed at that time and through to the present, balancing resource conservation with sustainable use and deepening our collective connection to nature. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the college, which was established in 1974 through the merger of the College of Agriculture and the School of Forestry, two land-grant pillars of UC Berkeley, uniting disciplines that remain essential to advancing environmental science, sustainable land management, and ecological stewardship. The last 50 years, starting with Earth Day in 1972, mark a major period in the history of conservation. As you look toward the next 50 years, we're in the midst of a critical transformation, grappling with the joint challenges of biodiversity loss, the climate crisis, and global sustainability, while reimagining the engagement between conservation, tribal communities, and constituencies who have not had a seat at the table. Institutions like ours must amplify interdisciplinary research, embrace bold policy initiatives, and lead global conservation efforts to confront these urgent challenges. Just as Albright shaped the early landscape of environmental stewardship, current and future leaders will draw on this legacy to create innovative solutions that protect and sustain our planet for generations to come. It's an exciting time to be in conservation, and of course, one of the great pleasures being at the university is sharing this with new generations of students who join us every year. I would now like to introduce my colleague, Justin Brashears, Professor of Wildlife Management in our Department of Environmental Science Policy and Management, who will introduce our speaker. Justin's research blends ecology and interdisciplinary environmental science to explore how human activities affect biodiversity and society. He has led a variety of research initiatives that connect biodiversity conservation with economics, public health, and environmental justice, striving to communicate the everyday consequences of environmental change for both nature and society. He has also had major collaborations with National Geographic and currently serves on the Committee for Research and Exploration, an external interdisciplinary advisory body of experts who actively support National Geographic's goals to expand geographic knowledge, protect global resources, inspire action, preserve cultural heritage, and center communities through impactful storytelling. Welcome, Justin.
Well, thank you very much, David, and to all of you for coming tonight. This is very exciting. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, the visionary Chief Executive Officer of the National Geographic Society, Jill Tiefenthaler. And as CEO of National Geographic Society, Jill oversees the Society's global nonprofit work and programmatic agenda across science, exploration, education, and storytelling to elevate the Society's mission of illuminating and protecting the wonder of the world. And I want to take a diversion, which is going to give gasps to everyone who knows me, to just take a second and acknowledge, I want to acknowledge and emphasize the importance and weight of that mission. National Geographic, through its magazine, website, shows, documentaries, social media, which I hope we'll hear more from Jill about, and education programs, has become the most trusted source of information on our planet today. And that trust crosses countries and continents, and it even transcends the political lines in the US that feel more like barbed wires right now. With this trust and unrivaled reach across our communities, across our planet, Jill and her team take on the vast responsibility of curating our story, our collective story, and the story of our changing planet. And through those stories, inspiring curiosity, hope, and highlighting the journey we share together as Homo sapiens on Earth. And that's a weighty responsibility. Sorry if I'm stressing you out, Jill. There you are. Yeah, you're stressed. But Jill is the right leader to manage the weight of that mission. And first, I'll tell you why. First of all, Jill's connection to National Geographic Society and its mission runs deep. So growing up on her family's popcorn farm in Iowa, Jill engaged the stories of National Geographic magazine, like so many of us, as portals to the staggering natural and cultural diversity and beauty of our world. And second, Jill brings to National Geographic Society a renowned energy, pragmatism, and commitment to inclusion, innovation, and impact that was forged in the crucible of academic leadership. Some of you are laughing already about that language, but David is nodding, and I'll just say, you should have seen how young he looked when he started in this job. Anyway. So after earning her master's and a PhD in economics from Duke University, Jill carried the trust of renowned institutions and their diverse constituents as a professor of economics at Colgate University and later as a provost at Wake Forest University. And prior to joining the National Geographic Society in 2020, Jill had spent 9 years as the president of Colorado College, which incidentally sends many of their students to Berkeley as graduate students. Jill's career of leadership and higher education translates seamlessly, as you'll see, into leading the Society and its community of change makers. And since joining National Geographic Society, Jill has led the development of the Society's bold new strategic plan called NG Next, which charts a path to drive significant positive impact and adds new life to the transformational work of the Society. So settle in and get ready to hear more about this. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming our 2024 Horace M. Albright Lecturer in Conservation, Dr. Jill Tiefenthaler.
Thank you so much, Justin, and good evening, everybody. Thank you. I'm thrilled and honored to be here. Dean Ackerley, distinguished faculty, students, staff, alumni, guests, thank you for the invitation and the warm welcome. It is always energizing to be back on a campus, and especially this one. When I think about Berkeley, I think of an engine of creativity and innovation and action. It's really more than a powerhouse academic institution, what it is, but also, I think, a launch pad for solutions. And it's really impressive to see how Berkeley faculty, students, and alumni are leading the way with breakthrough research and scalable solutions across so many fields. Of course, climate change resilience, clean energy, conservation, environmental justice, and so much more. At the National Geographic Society, we share these values. Action has always been central to our mission, and it's one of the things I love most about what we do. I think we understand the urgency of the global challenges that are before us, and we're putting enormous pressure on our planet. The world must act, and act quickly if we're to build a sustainable future. But we can't just act as we have in the past. We have to change our approach. And at the National Geographic Society, as we build our next chapter, guided by our strategic plan, we're embracing change that I believe is critical to meeting this moment. But before we get into that, I thought I would just start by asking all of you, when you think of National Geographic, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Magazine. Yes. Instagram. Oh, I'd love to hear that too. Well, for the more of the seasoned members of the audience, I expect it might be this, our iconic magazine framed by the yellow border. Maybe a past cover story stuck with you, like Jane Goodall's work with chimpanzees, or the treasures of King Tut's tomb, as Justin mentioned. That was the one for me in middle school that really grabbed my attention. Or perhaps it's more of our recent work, our deep dives into today's urgent challenges like rising seas, the war against science, and the extinction crisis. Or maybe it might be the stories of California. National Geographic has extensively covered the Golden State and UC Berkeley, including this May 1966 issue that prominently featured the campus. And as I explored our archives, as David mentioned, we clearly have a very strong shared history that stretches back even farther to UC Berkeley alumnus Horace Albright, for whom this lecture series is named. In the early 1900s, many national parks were in pretty rough shape, run down, neglected, exploited for their resources. And Albright and his colleague, Stephen Mather, who were both working at the Department of the Interior, took it upon themselves to change that. They rallied public support and lobbied for federal funding and stronger protection. Mather, in particular, believed the best way to protect the parks was to get people to experience them firsthand. So in 1915, they organized a 2-week expedition through the High Sierras, bringing a group of influential leaders to see the beauty of these places up close. Among those invited was Gilbert Grosvenor, the first full-time editor of National Geographic magazine. Grosvenor was so inspired by the trip that in 1916, he produced a special issue of the magazine titled The Land of the Best, dedicated to promoting the parks. He ensured a copy landed on the desk of every member of Congress just in time for the vote to establish the National Park Service. Their collective efforts paid off. After years of failed attempts, the bill finally passed, and the National Park Service was born. Mather became its first director, with Albright serving as his deputy and later successor. The power of using media to bring about change was an early model that continues to guide our work at National Geographic. And today, we continue sharing stories of exploration, science, and conservation in the magazine and beyond. We're actually the biggest brand on social media in the world, with over 800 million followers. That's way more than the Kardashians. Across our global media network, including our partnership with Disney and our tile on Disney+, we reach billions of people every year. But the work of the National Geographic Society is far beyond media. We have a legacy that's deeply rooted in mission. As a global nonprofit organization since 1888, we use the power of science, exploration, education, and storytelling to illuminate and protect the wonder of the world. It's a bold mission, so how do we translate it into action? We fund and support thousands of dynamic change makers, scientists, conservationists, educators, and storytellers. There are National Geographic explorers who are advancing knowledge by making important contributions to science, leading big, bold conservation programs, helping us to protect our planet, and driving impact through illumination, both world-class storytelling and transformative education to inform, engage, and inspire people to take action. So, who's an explorer today? Take a look.
If I was an explorer, I would wake up, put on my gear, put on my hijab, binoculars, a hat. I would take my tools to investigate. I'd put on my spacesuit, and then I'd shoot off into the stars. If I was an explorer,
I'd climb into a rocket.
I'd fly to the sun. I like to go to the places that most people usually don't go to. explore my city. I'd tell stories to the world with my photos and videos of my experiences, my discoveries. I'd go to the depths of space, the bottom of an ocean.
If I was an explorer, I wouldn't care about getting dirty.
I would discover and analyze different things that have never been seen before.
I'll discover new species.
I would take my findings back to the lab to build things, create new things.
I'd find a cure for cancer.
I'd recycle our trash to build buildings.
And make the world a better place.
Maybe an explorer is all about understanding this world better.
To show the world a different way of seeing.
To venture into uncharted territory.
My name is Arthur Huang.
My name is Hannah Reyes Morales.
My name is Dominique Demille Correa Gonçalves, and this is what an explorer looks like.
With Berkeley's long history of innovation, it's no surprise that nearly 100 Berkeley faculty, alumni, and even students are National Geographic explorers, including Arthur, Chris, Alejandra, Christine, and Vihan. Vihan's actually here, and he was just named our young explorer, who's a sophomore here at Berkeley. Vihan, where are you? There he is, right in the front row. And of course, Justin is a member of the Society's prestigious Committee for Research and Exploration. So this community of amazing talent and passion, 3,000 explorers strong from 140 countries, along with one of the world's most recognized and trusted brands, a global reach of more than 2.5 billion across our platforms, give really the Society an unmatched opportunity and responsibility to accelerate impact at this critical moment. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, how we're leveraging these assets, but also embracing change to meet the moment. So first, no organization can meet the challenges we're facing alone. We must tap into the power of partnerships. To create the change that we want to see in the world, we must come together, individuals, organizations, governments, and share knowledge, expertise, best practices, tools, technology. Together with the right partners, we can do more and also ensure that the change is durable. This is essential to our strategy at the Society, doubling down on opportunities to bring together explorers and other experts and partners that through collaboration have the potential to move the needle. One key example is our National Geographic and Rolex Perpetual Planet expeditions, an ambitious initiative to deepen our understanding of Earth's vital life support systems so we can safeguard them for future generations. We began with mountain systems, and we're Nat Geo, so we started with the most extreme environments we could find, including Everest, Tiefenthaler in the Andes, and Logan in Canada, some of the highest mountains on Earth. The vision of the expeditions was matched only by their impact. The teams amassed a wealth of scientific data, collecting first of their kind scientific samples, extracting thousands of years of geologic history from ice cores, documenting biological organisms, discovering proof of a rare cat species, and breaking records with our weather stations. The team installed 9 weather stations in some of the highest places in the world, including the highest altitude weather station on Earth on top of Mount Everest. And it's true that few places on Earth inspire awe like Everest. And explorers Baker Perry and Tom Matthews, along with elite climbers Dawa Sherpa and Tenzing Gyaltsen Sherpa, led that expedition, which included an international team of more than 30 scientists seeking to understand the future of snow and ice in the region, which provides critical resources, water resources, to over 2 million people in Nepal and beyond, and which is rapidly changing due to climate change. Here's a glimpse of that expedition.
This is a different expedition than we ever had before.
We're working where basically no other scientists work.
This is the highest place in the world.
The climate is changing.
These glaciers are melting.
it's very important to predict how fast it's going to happen and how it's going to influence human.
Mount Everest is part of the Himalayas. We're here on a 2-month expedition with National Geographic. The largest scientific expedition ever conducted on Mount Everest. The scientists involved in this program came from glaciology, geology, meteorology,
panels in here,
biology, and also from mapping.
This is an important contribution to understanding how change is occurring and the implications of that change for the entire Northern Hemisphere. The ultimate goal of this project is to turn the science into something that has value for the people.
I love that last line in that video, turning science into something that's valuable for the people. That's exactly what the team did. Not only did they publish over 30 scientific papers, but the weather stations are providing key weather data from Everest, which is invaluable to the local communities and to science. We then shared the expedition with the world, reaching hundreds of millions of people through a documentary, an exhibition, and the magazine. In fact, the magazine was the cover story for 35 country editions translated into 28 languages. The next phase of our Perpetual Planet expedition brings us to the heart of the Amazon, where 17 National Geographic explorers are leading an ambitious interdisciplinary effort across the Amazon River Basin. They're investigating the connectivity of the Amazon Basin's water cycles from the Andes to the Atlantic. The goal is to better understand the health of the entire basin ecosystem, mountains, rivers, rainforests, and coastline. And along the way, the teams are gathering critical insight on freshwater health, tracking Andean bears, studying mangroves and flooded forests, and observing river dolphins. Amidst the worst drought in recorded history in the Amazon, which is happening right now, these teams are working across countries and ecosystems to identify solutions in close collaboration with indigenous nations and local communities. Two leaders who are from and have worked in the Amazon for decades are explorers Ruth Mary Pilko Horkaya, who leads field activities for the community-based Reforestation to Protect Andean Bears project, and Fernando Trujillo, who founded the Omacha Foundation more than 30 years ago to safeguard the pink river dolphins that depend on the river's health. By partnering with existing grassroots organizations like these, we can scale tested solutions, accelerate their work with resources, and facilitate collaboration across the region. The sum is greater than the parts. We also supercharge their impact with our brand and platforms. One of our National Geographic storytellers, Tom Peshek, joined the expedition and created an unbelievable collection of photography and stories. He took almost 500,000 photographs. Through our partnership with Disney, we amplified these stories with global audience, and this shows some of the highlights. A special issue of National Geographic magazine last month, entirely dedicated to the Amazon expedition, an amazing interactive experience about the Amazon across our digital platforms, and a new feature-length documentary, Expedition Amazon, now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu. Another example of the power of partnerships comes from what, he's laughing because his face is so big on that screen, is from one of Berkeley's very own, Arthur Middleton. In addition to being a professor here, Arthur wears many hats: National Geographic explorer, wildlife ecologist, conservation expert, and faculty co-director with Professor Stephanie Carlson of the New Stone Center for Environmental Stewardship here at Berkeley. The center's at the forefront of community-engaged research in environmental conservation with a mission to increase the pace, scale, equity, and durability of large-scale conservation. We are inspired by their vision to make Berkeley the academic heart of a global conservation network. removing barriers to drive meaningful change for environmental impact. Arthur's journey with the Society began over a decade ago with Beyond Yellowstone, an ambitious initiative to connect people, landscapes, and policies vital to the long-term survival of Yellowstone's wildlife. With support from the Society and a growing network of collaborators, he set out to map and protect wildlife corridors across the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. The Society amplified Arthur's work in a National Geographic magazine cover story, a map supplement, a traveling exhibit, and a short film, all designed to spark interest and pride in Yellowstone's wildlife. And it worked. Beyond Yellowstone built bridges across a diverse coalition of on-the-ground collaborators, from landowners and ranchers to hunters, tribal members, nonprofits, and others. The program achieved success, including expanding conservation across more than 9 million acres of private and tribal lands in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and securing a $100 million investment from the USDA to support wildlife corridors throughout the region. Today, Beyond Yellowstone is still one of the Stone Center's living labs, a signature initiative. And the Society is excited to support one of the center's newest projects, the California Wolf Project, which is led by Arthur, Justin, and the Berkeley Wildlife Team. They're partnering with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to monitor the return of wolves to the state after a 80-year absence. Their goal is to help California build knowledge and needed to sustain the wolves once again, like this one picked up by their camera trap. We look forward to strengthening our partnership with the Berkeley Wildlife Team and the Stone Center for Environmental Stewardship. Partnerships are also central to the vision of explorer and marine biologist David Gruber. David leads Project SETI, a multidisciplinary program that aims to listen to and understand sperm whale communication. Project SETI is the most ambitious and technologically sophisticated effort ever attempted to communicate with another species. And David understands that the only way to achieve this truly audacious goal is through radical collaboration. He works with 15 institutions and more than 40 scientists and experts, marine biologists, roboticists, computer scientists, linguists, cryptographers. And among them is Berkeley's own Shafi Goldwasser, who leads theoretical analysis for the project. Project SETI is based in Dominica, home to about 200 sperm whales, and where the team works closely with the Dominican field team, the government, and local nonprofits. SETI gathers a massive amount of data about the whales using machine learning and state-of-the-art robotics. Sperm whales click, if you don't know that, so that's a great species to get started on this adventure. And some of those robotics and much of the work is done in collaboration with explorer Rob Wood's robotics lab at Harvard and also in collaboration with MIT's computer science lab CSAIL. The team takes all of this data to train algorithms to decipher the whales' communication patterns. Their research has already led to several groundbreaking scientific publications, including a study published this summer that brings us closer to deciphering what could be a sperm whale phonetic alphabet. The implications of this program are profound. Project SETI has the potential to make interspecies communication a reality. And can you imagine what we could learn and the impact it would have if we could understand the whales? The breakthrough could really revolutionize our understanding and empathy for wildlife, illuminate entire ecosystems, and dramatically accelerate conservation. The second driver of change that we're embracing at the Society is the power of storytelling. I've spent most of my career, as Justin pointed out, working in academia, and I've learned that sometimes the facts are not enough to spark the change we need. To have an impact, we must share scientific knowledge widely, but not just within familiar circles, but with new audiences. And it's not enough to just provide information. We need to connect with people on a deeper level and touch their hearts. This is one of National Geographic's superpowers, our ability to tell stories that not only inform, but also inspire. One of my favorite quotes comes from explorer and photographer David Dubélé, who said, "If you want to protect nature, you first have to love it. And if you want to love it, you first have to understand it. And if you want to understand it, you first have to see it." Through their storytelling, explorers Steve Winter and Sharon Guynup enable us to see some of the issues up close. Steve is a photographer whose iconic images capture the beauty of tigers, snow leopards, and other animals, while emphasizing the need to protect them. And as a journalist, Sharon investigates and uncovers stories of the illicit wildlife trade. Together, they spent years investigating captive tigers in the US, like roadside zoos. Through their coverage, Steve and Sharon shed light on the pressing need for stricter regulation of threatened animal populations. Their stories moved the public and US lawmakers, resulting in national legislation in 2022, the Big Cat Public Safety Act, which prohibits owning tigers or other cats as pets and ends public contact with them. This is the power of storytelling to drive conservation. Another powerful example of National Geographic storytelling at its best is explorer Joel Sartore. 18 years ago, Joel had an amazing idea to create an arc of animal photos. He's on a quest to make portraits of all 20,000 plus species in human care in the world's zoos, aquariums, and wildlife sanctuaries, with the goal of inspiring people to care and to act to save these animals before they're gone forever. So far, Joel has spotlighted more than 16,000 species, including this salamander, native to the Bay Area, photographed right here at the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at UC Berkeley. Joel was the first explorer I met in the field, and seeing him in action behind the scenes, it became very clear that getting the perfect shot is hard work. Done that 16,000 times. Inspired by Joel, the Society launched the Photo Arc Species Impact Initiative to fund science-based projects for on-the-ground species conservation. Explorer George Gann received the first grant. George's research focuses on habitat restoration for endangered insects, including this beetle and butterfly in Florida, the only place in the world where they're found. While insects like these are often underappreciated, they're vital to our ecosystems. The Miami tiger beetle and the threats it faces garnered attention when Joel named it its 15,000th species of the photo arc. The media buzz moved local leaders to take action. In a remarkable turn of events, a board of commissioners voted to protect this ecosystem by withdrawing a development proposal. Another example of how storytelling can lead to positive change, a tangible conservation outcome. Photographer Anand Varma is a great example of an explorer who uses science and in storytelling to inspire change. And Anand is here somewhere, right? Where are you, Anand? There he is. Yay. Years ago, he pitched a story to the magazine about hummingbirds, but the editors weren't sold. As the story goes, they told him, "That's boring. Every photo of a hummingbird that can be taken has been taken." But Anand persisted, and it paid off. His work has since been featured in 13 National Geographic magazine stories, capturing the majesty of the world's smallest creatures, from honeybees to hummingbirds. Take a look.
Now, the work that I'm most proud of is the result of a 10-year-long collaboration with a scientist who studies hummingbirds. This is a story on what we have learned about hummingbirds thanks to modern science. The most fun I had working on this project was getting to point the high-speed camera at hummingbirds to show these discoveries in a new way. Here is a cage that's recreating an experiment, and it's trying to look at how hummingbirds deal with rain. And we're using this fancy top-of-the-line Phantom Flex 4K high-speed camera to try to film this hummingbird at 1,000 frames a second to see how it's going to deal with all these rain droplets and what it's going to do to dry itself off. It is that sense of wonder and that joy of discovery that drew me to photography, and it is those feelings I hope to spark in other people.
Definitely not boring, right? Last year, Anand launched Wonder Lab, a creative studio based right here in the city of Berkeley, where he pushes the boundaries of storytelling by exploring the invisible world around us. Through innovative photography and video techniques, Anand reveals these hidden wonders, the details and life cycles of creatures, large and small, that would otherwise go unnoticed. You may recognize Anand from Nat Geo's TV series Photographer, which you can also watch on Disney+, where Anand takes you along on assignment. Anand's dreams go beyond sharing science. He's driven to inspire others, especially young people, to connect with the wonder of the natural world. So he partnered with our society education team to develop online resources for thousands of teachers and students to help them create their own wonder labs, to slow down, observe, and uncover the mysteries of the hidden world in plain sight. At the Society, we are motivated to engage that next generation of planetary stewards and storytellers who are dreaming big and demanding change. And we need to meet them where they are through video and on social media. The Slingshot Challenge, a partnership with the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation, showcases the ideas of 13 to 18-year-olds around the globe. They submit videos with creative solutions to environmental challenges in their communities, whether it be to protect nature, clean the air, restore the ocean, reduce waste, or address climate change. Over the last 2 years, we've reached millions of young people on social media, inspiring thousands to submit their ideas. And each year, we select winners who receive a cash prize to develop their solutions. And equally important connect them with National Geographic explorers like Joel Sartori, who inspired Slingshot Award recipient Soren Goldsmith. Here's a look at Soren's submission.
I want to help save this forest. The challenge is getting other people to care. But how can someone grow to care about something if they don't see it or even know it's there? There's a small stretch of forest here in Massachusetts that a company wants to clear. If it's approved by my town, crucial Massachusetts wildlife habitat will be turned into a parking lot. As Nat Geo explorer Joel Sartori says, it's all about telling the story of wild animals in a way that gets people to stop and pay attention. I've been using motion-activated cameras to tackle this. I'm revealing the unseen wildlife that calls these patches of woods their home. Allowing the woods to be destroyed sets the precedent that it's okay to keep removing the few forests we have left. We're collaborating with local communities' outreach efforts to help conserve these wildlife habitats. I hope my town's decision makers are moved by my photos and the creatures whose lives they are affecting. Save the forest!
Save the forest. So, and this was the moment that Soren first met Joel, his role model. It's been incredible to see the chain reaction. Joel's work inspired Soren, and now Soren is inspiring other young people to sharpen their storytelling skills for positive change. Soren was just welcomed, along with Vihan, into our latest cohort of National Geographic explorers. To achieve our mission and truly meet this moment, National Geographic is changing in other ways. That brings me to our third driver of change, empowering the people who are connected to and understand a place to determine its future. When I first started at the Society, we were working on our strategic plan, discussing what we needed to do to profoundly accelerate our impact. And National Geographic explorer Noel Koch asked and answered a profound question. He asked, how do you change the story? And he answered, you change the storyteller. And that sentiment holds true for science and conservation too. We now know that change is only sustainable when led and owned by local communities. Extensive research underscores that conservation efforts are most effective when they not only integrate traditional knowledge, but prioritize community ownership, supporting the local stewards who are deeply invested in the natural world around them and its future. So we challenged ourselves at National Geographic, and to be candid, have been challenged by others, to reflect on our history and engage in more inclusive approaches to our work. Today, our global community of 3,000 active explorers spans more than 140 countries, and 71% of our new grants in the past 3 years have been awarded to non-US citizens. This map highlights field sites where our explorers are working, and many, as shown in yellow, are leading projects in their home countries and regions. A great example of community involvement is explorer Victoria Herman, who is committed to leveraging local knowledge and working with and supporting community experts, truly putting communities in the driver's seat in responding to the effects of climate change. When we think about a warming planet, we often think about the impacts on nature, and we should. But climate change is also one of the fastest growing threats to cultural, archaeological, and historic treasures. This is where Victoria and her team come in, with preserving legacies, a future for our past, which places heritage at the center of climate action. Each year, the program partners with communities around the world that are facing climate risk, like the rice terraces of the Philippines and Petra in Jordan. Together with local leaders, site managers, and organizations like the International Council for Monuments and Sites, they co-create sustainable, culturally respectful solutions to protect these iconic places from flooding, erosion, wildfires, and other threats. Their approach combines scientific knowledge with generational wisdom, using downscaled climate models to empower communities to assess risks, set priorities, and create strategies to safeguard their heritage for the future. Here's Victoria.
Understanding how these community values will be impacted in 2030, 2050, 2100, and how big those floods will get, mean that they have a clearer picture on how to act. Sites like Petra are now taking their learning and that community-based risk assessment and putting that into site-saving action.
National Geographic's Okavango Wilderness Project is another example of what we can achieve when we shift our approach, from outsiders coming in to make change to working alongside and empowering those already there doing the work. This team of explorers, all 8 from Southern Africa, collaborate with local communities, governments, and regional experts to preserve the greater Okavango River Basin, one of Africa's most critical wetland ecosystems stretching across Angola, Botswana, and Namibia. The team has marked many scientific milestones, including this discovery of 53 species new to science and essential baseline surveys of the delta's health. And the team agrees none of these contributions would have been possible without traditional knowledge. Conserving this spectacular place for current and future generations relies on national support for the people of the basin, who have long preserved the Okavango Delta, its wildlife and traditions. To garner that support, the Society produced a feature-length film, Nakashi Race for the Okavango, created with Botswana talent for the people of Botswana. The film follows competitors in the Nakashi Classic, a race in the Delta that celebrates the Mokoro and the Nakashi, the traditional canoe and the accompanying pole that are commonly used in the Okavango. It was produced in the local language, Setswana, features local community members, has Botswana filmmakers behind the camera, and includes original music from local composers and musicians. The Botswana president joined us for the film premiere in the capital, and the film was also premiered with much excitement in the Delta communities, followed by multiple screenings. It was also shown weekly on public television in Botswana for a year. Here's the trailer.
Mahatsaga kwayale abana diphologolo abana metsa go anwana ka sata o moae umpeno dinuka dia khana tsa bona re gaisana
mofenyi wa Nkashi Classic o ra gore motho o kgona go ipoka a ipela gore ke ene o fentseng
ka gore o nna hela o sa banka yemile a bortsa zela bo helo kono wa gore jana wa go do wa go palela
dinyabe itsa gore yo ta le bana le nna na ke ta go msota out
mibile ba itsanape bangano ka ba retsamang le bone ke bona ba ba itseng ditsela tse ne go ra ditsamang
batho ba te bontsi ja te gore go le ditsela tsa tekana le ya gongwe ke mokoro
tota tiro ya mokoro e bata bo brave mme ka botshelo wa gongwe bo le thata le jo bo helang go go tsenya mo diphatse le ga re dire ka gore o bo sena ruta ha o nna hela o ta tshela ka eng
rona re le Batswana tshwantse ra tshmarela makgobokobo ke le gae la rona tshwanetse ra tlhokomela makgobokobo
African people have shared stories about their natural heritage and wildlife for centuries. However, the dominant voices shaping the global stories have historically not been those from Africa. Explorers Noel Koch and his wife Pragna Koch co-founded Nature, Environment, and Wildlife Filmmakers to shift the narrative, to ensure the stories of Africa are told by and from the perspective of African people. Noel's vision to change the storyteller inspired us to work with them to create a new program to scale their efforts. Africa Refocused aims to remove barriers faced by African storytellers by offering mentorship, networking, resources, and specialized training. In fact, last year, Africa Refocused opened a dive center in South Africa to give African storytellers, scientists, and conservationists access to underwater research and filmmaking. In 2 years, the community has grown to 250 fellows from 32 African countries. So far, these storytellers have created 55 films, now in various stages of production, that tell the gripping and often overlooked stories of Africa that the world needs to see. When all of these elements come together, when we can form and leverage powerful partnerships, elevate rigorous science and important conservation projects with world-class storytelling, and prioritize community leadership and stewardship, we can drive real impact. We can realize the change that we want to see in the world. So I want to close with one final example. This is Explorer in Residence Enrique Sala, who leads our Pristine Seas program. Enrique grew up in Spain, swimming in the Mediterranean, and he fell in love with the sea and decided to devote his life to studying it by becoming a marine scientist. But along the way, Enrique felt like he was writing the obituary of the ocean. So he left his academic career and joined National Geographic to dedicate his efforts to safeguarding the last wild places in the sea. Today, Enrique and the Pristine Seas team lead expeditions around the globe using science, storytelling, and education to inspire the creation of marine protected areas, which help to mitigate climate change, curb biodiversity loss, and increase food security. These are some of the MPAs. They're really beautiful. Key to Pristine Seas' success is working closely with local communities, other nonprofits, indigenous groups, and governments. And Enrique and his team are very thoughtful about who they're working with. They are not focused on the broader public, but the decision makers, often community elders or a cabinet minister, and the sustainers, the individuals who can protect the waters and the diversity of life they call home. Take a look.
We are defined by the environments that we live in. It's our life. The ocean is our life.
It's not only an issue of economic, it's really about emotions.
This is one of these rare places on Earth where we can see the ocean of the past.
Miren hacia el mar y se miren las personas, porque si no hay recursos, no hay vida.
Lento, pero empezó la pesca comercial. Había una capturas masivas que aquí ya no era suficiente para vivir.
This species could go extinct in my lifetime.
The big fish are gone. They have been fished out.
As a global community, we need to decide what's the value of the ocean.
People protect what they love, and they love what they understand.
Which is where we fit in. The moment I set my eyes on these places, I know why we're here.
Conservation needs to be based on a sound understanding of how these ecosystems work, whether it's traditional knowledge or contemporary science.
These remote camera systems give us a complete picture of the life in the waters from the near shore to the deepest ocean depths.
importante trabajar con los pueblos originarios y las comunidades locales, porque han sido los verdaderos custodios de los lugares más frágiles del planeta.
Y si unimos podemos hacer tal potencia que no la va a poder derribar nadie.
They're our young leaders. We have to empower them with the passion to conserve the ocean.
I will work to declare Palau's waters closed to commercial fishing.
2 nuevos parques y o áreas marinas protegidas.
Y se constituye en un líder mundial en la conservación marina.
For us to remain this way for the future and for our young people, we have to ensure we help preserve our environment.
The answer is not coming from outside, it's going to be within.
Seeing the planet as it used to be, see the ocean as it should be, and try to bring it back.
Last year, Pristine Seas embarked on a global expedition to the tropical Pacific aboard their expedition vessel Argo to study and document the potential for new marine protected areas. And we've just actually recently secured the 28th with as well. So the journey to protect nature and ourselves is not easy, but our explorers' efforts show us that progress is not just a dream, but actually achievable. So as we stand at this really critical moment in history for our world, my message, I think today, I hope, is one of hope, but also one of urgency. And everyone has a role to play. Achieving our goals hinges on all of us working together, passionate individuals, champions of the natural world, innovators, educators, entrepreneurs, storytellers, all people like you. By joining forces, we can lever expertise across industries, countries, cultures, and sectors. We can inspire more people to join us through compelling storytelling, and we can elevate talent and empower communities from across the globe to ensure lasting solutions. Together, we can advance our mission to illuminate and protect the wonder of our world, and together we can drive change and create a sustainable future. Thank you.
Now, the beauty of technology. All brought to us by the beauty of technology. So, first of all, thank you.
Thank you.
And I can't think of a speaker we've had who actually could weave such a synthetic story that we're part of. So as Dean also, this is part of our business, and Jill knows as well. Thank you for all your support for our explorers and for faculty and students. So several of you sent in questions in advance, and I'm going to sort of interweave some of them together. But this is what I want to do. At the core of so many of the stories here is the role of students and youth and our future. So the first 3 questions will go to how many students, raise your hand if you're a current student, undergraduate, graduate student. Oh my goodness, how absolutely fantastic. The first 3 questions, at least, will go only to students. Adults hold back. You're all adults, I know that. But I'm going to ask the first one before we do. So I've been reflecting, listening to you and over the last few days about interesting parallels between our institutions. And one important one is we're quite upfront with our values. We know what we share with the world, what we would like to see, the beauty we'd like to see in the world. And at the same time, society's trust in us comes from the fact that at some level they believe in whether it's objectivity, impartiality, being apolitical. And we would like to think that saving the world for the future of humanity was apolitical. We would like to think that creating a world that provided justice and well-being for all of the people in the world was apolitical. but unfortunately we're not in that world. So how do you approach being so forward-leading on climate, on justice, on communities, and maintaining such a trusted brand that I think has built as much of a sort of apolitical, to put it bluntly, brand as may exist in this business, globally and certainly in the United States?
Yeah, I think part of that is a very long history that National Geographic has of putting science first and having the facts lead the rest of what we do, and we continue to do that now. Our conservation work, our storytelling is always grounded in science, and I think people are open with that. I also think we take the approach of inspiration rather than lecturing sometimes, and I think that trying to touch hearts, go with minds for facts and hearts when it comes to getting people engaged. People come to us both for the brand and the history and the science, but also that way we approach it with more openness, and it is a huge asset that we have. Because to get all this work done, we need a lot of people to come along with us to make change. So, and as you said, you saw we don't shy away from policy. We have explorers out there on the forefront of trying to move the policy needle, and we get very involved with that related to our mission. But we do try to stay out of politics. Well, and what you focus on there is leading with science. Unfortunately, it's not clear that solves the problem in today's climate, that even that trust in science, of course, it's at the core in the university of how we operate. And I think we know we've learned many times over that offering, especially in our teaching, offering students, offering the world solutions is an antidote to sort of despair at times. Absolutely. We also have a very optimistic point of view at National Geographic, which I think also brings a lot of people along. And I think what we don't do quite as well is offering the world beauty. But we can all learn from it. And I know every one of us who teaches, of course, is always trying to bring that beauty into our classroom and into our teaching. So I hope that gave you all a little time to consider who would like to raise their hand. Again, I'd like to turn to students in the room first. And I can't see super well, so go ahead, right up there. And the mic will come to you, and then please hand it back so that the ushers can move it to others after you ask your question.
Hello, my name is Marwa. I'm a senior here studying MEB in film. And I just wanted to ask, I'm taking a documentary class, and one of the things we talk about is the problem of authenticity. By making a documentary, you dictate life as it is and life as it isn't, creating an other. So I was wondering, how does National Geographic approach this problem of creating an other by dictating a mainstream narrative with your long history? I know you mentioned like making films with community members, local community, like the Nature Environment program. But I'm just wondering, like, if you're looking to expand your storytelling from like voiceover narrative and interview based to more like experimental or like self-reflexive documentaries. Yeah, so it's a great question, and we have, I think the most important answer to that is shifting the storyteller, and part of that is during COVID, for example, we learned really good lessons. One of them was we realized the world needed coverage of the pandemic and what was happening in communities. And it was a time when no one could travel. So we put out a global call to our storytellers all over the world and funded, I think, around 350 different storytellers globally, and to cover COVID in their own communities. And the amazing stories and coverage that we received, that was not only made for National Geographic, it was in local and national and media, magazines, newspapers, TV outlets all over the world. Something as a nonprofit, while some of our work definitely will end up in the magazine and in National Geographic, we're funding lots of people who are using all kinds of channels to get their work out. And a lot of that'll be grants to storytellers. So of those 3,000 explorers, probably about a third of them are global storytellers all over the world, and we're consistently expanding our reach
of those for that authenticity. So we are not doing parachute storytelling, just as not doing parachute science or conservation, and really having those stories. And then part of that too is lending our brand expertise resources to those storytellers. So, the Dive Center with Africa Focus, for example, has just been a game changer for a lot of folks who've never been able to cover the ocean in Africa, or scientists who've been able to do their work because they didn't have access to learning to be expert divers. So trying to remove some of those barriers, but then also have the coverage be authentic and happening where it's happening. The other thing that I'm really excited about is about a year and a half ago, we just launched a new Impact Story Lab on the society side. They made the Nakashi film, and almost all of the folks that were cinematographers, choreographers, everything else for that film were from Botswana. And in fact, the composer for the film won a bunch of awards in the US at all the film festivals for the music that was scored. And so we're actually now funding a whole bunch of composers to do African music for African films, not only their films, but other films that are made there. So trying to find all those ways, and that Impact Story Lab is not driven by a media goal. It's really driven by an impact goal. And we're actually also funding research on how does great storytelling lead to impact? So really focusing on that. So I guess the answer to your question, it's harder to think about the, what ends up on Disney Plus, but we are trying to all fund storytellers at all levels that are part of our National Geographic family, who are covering their local communities, regional events, their countries, and be part of our network of storytellers globally.
And thank you for the question, because I think good storytelling is grounded in good science. And I think increasingly good science, we realize as scientists, we need to be better storytellers. And that's what we all,
yeah.
That's
in
what we
addition
respond
to the experts that we fund and support, we also work hard with all of our explorers, our scientists, and others to help them become better storytellers too. So whether they're talking to a public audience, et cetera, that they can expand their reach and have more impact is another way through storytelling. But on the filmmaker side, I'd love to show you more of what we're doing, because we're really proud of some of the changes that we're making in that regard.
So I saw Vishal. If you can bring a mic down to the front, that'd be wonderful, and then we'll go back up afterwards.
So I noticed that National Geographic has a new museum coming out, and I was wondering, we talked about how storytelling can help inspire people to care about conservation, and I'm wondering how events, initiatives like this museum or other more immersive experiences like expeditions, how that plays into that. Is that bringing people one step closer? Is that the goal with these kinds of initiatives?
What a great, somebody plant that question. I love that question. Thank you, Vishal. Yes, we are expanding our public space in Washington, D.C. So we've been in Washington, D.C. since we were founded in 1888. And in our current site, we're about 6 blocks from the White House there since the early 1900s. And we used to have a small museum. I don't know if any of you have ever visited our museum with changing exhibits, but now we're about to expand that space from about 20,000 square feet to well over 100,000 square feet, and adding not only the exhibits, but also photography, amazing immersive experience, which will take people on an expedition. At the very end, you'll get to have your story and your face on the cover of National Geographic. And a history of our archives, an education center, and a nighttime show even, which will start being about the ocean. So we're really excited about this. And to your point, we see this as another platform, just like our other platforms I mentioned, to reach the public. And, experiences is, I think, one of the really powerful ways to do that right now. So we're opening in spring of 2026, and you're all invited. I hope you come and join us. Thank you.
Right in the middle, I can see one, if you can get a mic there. Oh, actually, you know what? We'll do 2. So go ahead. You have a mic already, and then we'll come back to you. Go ahead. You go ahead. Was there one over in this way?
Yeah, I actually did have a question.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Finn Does. I am a freshman at UC Berkeley studying society and environment, and I'm also a climate justice organizer. And I think that probably a lot of folks in the room have been affected by climate disasters and the climate crisis in general. And I'm just curious if there are ways that National Geographic is connecting the links between the continued burning of fossil fuels and the fossil fuel industry, who, by the way, is heavily invested in this institution, and the frequency of these climate events. Thank you.
Yes, important question. I mentioned a couple of the programs that we have where explorers are working directly on climate change, Victoria's Herman program, but we have many other explorers that are working at the forefront, certainly Enrique's work in oceans and really looking at things like the impact of trolling and et cetera on climate and other ways for carbon, so not only mitigation, but also resilience and adaptation. So a lot happening there, and it's one of we have a new focus area around planetary health at the Society, which is really focused on not only the impact on nature, but also the impact on people, which you point out is, been devastating to many. So it's definitely at one of the forefronts of our focus areas, and of those 3,000 people out there that we're supporting, many of them, either directly or indirectly, are working on climate. And we've done a lot of coverage on climate as well at National Geographic and we'll continue to do that. And I can tell you, we also have some programs for, you saw our Slingshot Challenge, which has climate as one of the solution areas. We are getting young people engaged in that. We also have an externship program for college students, and we have some of those have been focused on directly on climate and through nature-based solutions. So.
You have a mic right there.
Thank you. My name's Eric Heisey. I'm a PhD student in ESPM. I have always been inspired by, the magazines and the documentaries, and I'm sure they've inspired many people. And what I wonder is, how do we go beyond inspiring the general public and start interpreting this inspiration into policy? I know that you kind of said that National Geographic tries to stay out of politics, but also policy is needed. And maybe that's not exactly what you meant, but.
Yeah, I mean, I gave some examples today of how I think inspiration has led to actual tangible policy change. For example, Steve and Sharon's work on the Big Cat Safety Act. I also talked about George Gann's work as just some examples. There are many others that I can point to. And so while we stay out of politics, also we have to as a nonprofit, but we're very involved in policy that's committed. The 28 marine protected areas that Pristine Seas has helped to inspire and work with countries and local governments and communities are very policy oriented. Our team has been very involved with 30 by 30 at National Geographic, a huge driver of the High Ambition Coalition that was just passed at COP last year to get governments to agree on the 30 by 30 initiative. There's other great examples. One of our explorers, Carlton Ward, who works in Florida, has been working for years to get a wildlife corridor passed there. We worked with him with Video Impact Story Lab, did a video. We also did an issue of the magazine on the panther and gave one to every member of the Florida legislature. And amazingly, it was unanimously passed and signed by the governor into law a couple years ago. So definitely trying to move the needle with policy. It's not always easy, right? When you can directly measure, 600 publications last year in science journals that credited National Geographic, or the number of marine protected areas, or the number of acres of acres conserved or species saved, but that indirect effect of storytelling is, it's just like education. It's hard to measure the impact, right? Especially today. But I'm a firm believer, and we're, as I mentioned with our Impact Story Lab, we're trying to do more research and to understand better how moving people's emotions can actually get action. And we're gonna need that, right? We're gonna need people to, importantly, everyday actions are important, but to get all of us to vote and get a government that will move, right? And is really how we're going to get to major change. And also inspiring people to how they vote with their dollars as well, right? To get major change. And so I'm a firm believer as an educator my whole life. As part of that is educating people. But as I mentioned in my talk, the other part is inspiring people. And my job, I get to be inspired all the time by the work you see out there, and I think the beauty and the wonder of the world and what we have to protect is one important way, as well as the importance of the impact on us as well, right, which we have to talk about as well. So, politics, no. Policy, absolutely. And, we're always working to try to better understand how we can directly make those links. I hope that answered your question.
So you've addressed this just a little bit, but several of the questions that came in were actually career questions. So you've been in colleges and universities, and now where you are. What's the best advice you give for young people entering either conservation broadly or all these challenges we face? And a subset of that is, are there specific ways that Nat Geo offers opportunities for the next generation of students seeking opportunity?
Yeah, we do. We have some great opportunities at National Geographic. We have our Younger Explorers program. We have our externship program, which I mentioned, which runs multiple times a year, and it's from students all over the world that come together around a topic, and people can apply for that as well. Graduate students, we're always looking for new explorers, and we have the grant program that will send RFPs out regularly. So keep your eyes on those as well. Lots of other ways to get engaged with us through, I mentioned, learning and participating. In terms of advice, about, I don't know, anything, it's it's pretty hard, but, I would say I'm not going to say follow your passion, because I know if you have one, follow it. But there's so many of us that are not lucky enough to find that early in our career. But what an opportunity to be at a place like Berkeley and to be surrounded by not only the amazing faculty you have here and staff, but each other I always look back on my career and think some of the most amazing opportunities I've had are the peers that I've been with throughout my career. So take advantage of those people and networks and the mentors that you have, and be present and find your place out there. There's lots of important things that need to be done, and there's lots of different ways to do them. One could be, making films or working for National Geographic, but there are so many other important jobs and boards and politics and all the things that we need great leaders. But use this time here to get ready for a future that needs you.
We have time for one, maybe two, but at least one. Now we'll open it, even if you're not a student. Yeah.
Hi. My name is Ria. I'm also a first-year PhD at ESPM, and I'm going to try articulating my question properly. But so Nat Geo does a lot of research, and a lot of it, I think, at least historically, has been done from like a Western perspective, because we've had a lot of like Western science doing and leading this research. How do you think? But there's other perspectives and other knowledge systems and ways of seeing the world. How do you think Nat Geo can and should sort of acknowledge and work with and collaborate with all these different knowledge systems and ways of seeing the world to help with conservation and reduce conflicts between these different worldviews, so we can help with a unified conservational front, if that made sense.
Absolutely. And we have work to do on this, especially as you point out historically. You know, we had a very sort of Western way of working, often sending people out to do that work, and we've really shifted that to be working with people in communities and explorers who are from those communities. So this has led to, at National Geographic, doing much more of a national kind of search for talent and explorers rather than sort of going through our traditional methods. We now have different regional offices across the world that are out there meeting people and finding where their work. We've also now had several explorers who are not scientists but bring traditional knowledge that have been named explorers in the last few years. And we continue, I mentioned the Okavango Wilderness Project, for example. 2 of the 8 explorers on that project are not PhD scientists, but amazing folks with men with local knowledge of their communities, and have been absolutely critical to the expeditions and the outcomes that I mentioned earlier. The same work that I mentioned in the Amazon, there as well, where we're working with people who've long been on the ground, who are immersed in local communities and have the relationships. So a big part of our strategy is shifted to the old way of doing it and working to really identify success stories that are already out there, people from communities, and to lend some of our resources, our brand, our reach, our platforms to those programs and try to elevate that work rather than starting new or our own. That's going to continue to be a huge part of our strategy. It's the right thing to do. It's also the right way to have success in conservation, is to be working with those communities. I mentioned Victoria Herman's work is also all about presenting the resources, connecting these communities that are struggling with these issues all over the world so that they're sharing knowledge with each other and creating these community leaders who are really leading the work and being elevated for it. So, your point's a good one, and we haven't always got it right, but we're working hard to change our perspective and our focus, and I think making some progress.
And you could ask the same question of academic research, of course, and I think we would be harder pressed to pivot in the way that Nat Geo is pivoting. The academy, in its broadest sense, imposes a set of rules and norms that are incredibly conservative in the making change sense. So I think a lot of people in this room would share the same aspirations, and I think the partnership, and especially the partnership for students and faculty to engage with this much broader community of explorers, is an opening for us to be exploiting as well. So as a final question, you're the first woman to lead National Geographic. You're the first academic to lead National Geographic. And interested just your reflections on that. And as part of that, a couple of questions that came in was, who are your role models? And what do you do when you're not saving the world?
That's a lot of questions.
That's a lot of questions. You can take us through.
Yeah, I think being the first academic has been, in some ways, I think has been really helpful. I remember when I was an academic administrator, it helped that when I was a college president, it helped that I had done all the jobs. I'd been a professor, and I'd been a student, I'd been a dean, I'd been a department chair, some of the thankless jobs as well as the others. And so in this role, I feel for many of our explorers, I've, sat in their seats, I've gone through tenure, I've, moved around in positions. I've dealt with a lot of the issues, so that's been great. Unlike my predecessors who were all media people, I've had to learn that side of the business, and it's been a great and interesting education. But so I guess we've always been a nonprofit, but I think having someone who spent their life in mission work and nonprofits, and really we're really prioritizing that more. And now that we have a partnership with Disney who can deliver a lot of the big time media, we can really focus much more on the mission work. And I think we're doing that more than ever before. So that's a positive. Being a woman, I don't know. One thing I can tell you, so I'm an economist, and when I was the first woman tenured in my economics department, I was the first woman provost, I've been the first woman throughout in my career sometimes. And one thing I know is that representation matters and diversity matters. I remember as the first only woman in an economics department, I won't tell you how far back, but many years ago, that I realized my perspective helped. It made a difference. It changed the conversation. And I think that's something we all need to bring. I tried to bring that to my leadership at National Geographic. We have an incredibly diverse senior team and that importance of different voices at the table, different backgrounds, different perspectives just makes for better outcomes. So I don't know if it matters that I'm a woman, but I think again, that diversity is absolutely critical to success. And what do I do when I'm not working?
Role models?
Oh, role models is tough. There's so many. I mean, we have so many. I don't know if any of you know Sylvia Earle, who's a National Geographic Explorer at Large. I knew about Sylvia before I had the job, and here's a woman in the 1970s who tried to, be on an expedition underwater and they wouldn't let her go because she would have been the only woman. So what did she do? She did her own expedition for just women, and I was just on an expedition with her in the Galapagos, and she's 89, and she was diving and snorkeling every day when we were in the Galapagos. So she's certainly one of my role models, but it's just so many terrific people to admire the work they do.
Well, as we enter a season of gratitude, I first hope you will all take the inspiration to enjoy your own experiences in nature in the months and years ahead, of course, part of all of our lives. And also join me in thanking Jill for an absolutely extraordinary and wonderful talk.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.